Hey, veterinary friends, welcome to the Veterinary Life Coach Podcast. Today, I have a wonderful guest for you. Her name is JJ Flizanes. She's an empowerment strategist, author, podcaster, and the creator of the Empowering Minds Network. JJ has been empowering people in the areas of health, relationships, healing, and business since 2005. She helps people identify sabotaging patterns and transmute struggle into joy. She is passionate about empowering people with the knowledge and awareness of how they can live the life of their dreams. And that's what we're all about on this podcast. Welcome to the podcast, JJ. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thanks, Julie. I'm looking
Did I
forward to
say
our conversation.
your last name right?
You did.
Okay. I'm always worried about that because I don't always get that right. So welcome. And the first question I always ask all of my guests is to tell me their story. I like to hear about how you got to where you are today.
Okay. Just for my own organization of this said story, because I can
Okay.
go as detailed and as long as days on end, and I can go
Yeah.
as brief as like 2-minute wrap up. What points would you like me to hit on that you like a you know
Well, I like people to kind of give us an idea of why they became interested in what they're doing today. Because a lot of us as veterinarians, we struggle in our careers sometimes, and a lot of us think we want to do something different. A lot of us get stressed out by our job because it's very high stress. And so I kind of like to hear how you decided to do what you're doing and help the people you're helping. Maybe how you stumbled across some of the techniques that you use, just kind of
Sure.
a general idea of how you got to where you are and why you do what you do.
I started off as a dominant right brain kid, loved singing and dancing and acting and Englishes and arts and languages. Did okay with science, but didn't really get it. I mean, it was
Okay.
ethereal and not usable. I didn't
Yeah.
understand when I was going to use it. It wasn't exciting. But again, I did make honor roll and I had, good grades. So we get through school. I want to be an actor. I want to be a singer and a dancer. So I take myself to New York and I become an actor and a singer dancer. I go to, school for performing arts. But in that, and I did several different modalities of acting training, which actually have a lot of value to understand the differences. Maybe not in this conversation for today's show, but in general, and maybe I'll do a show on that actually, now that I'm thinking about that. It's like like each different shtick, if you will, not shtick, but each different flavor of acting school had a different point of view and what was important, and they taught in that way. And so you could tell by who you were studying with what they valued. And I had experienced a couple different kinds of these schools of thought in acting, and so much so that in one of the acting classes I went to NYU for a summer at the Tisch School of Arts and learned Stella Adler. And Stella Adler, probably the smartest of all of them, because she was a woman, but she appreciated that you would need to learn about the character and the day in the life of that character. And which kind of made sense because it isn't you. Nobody wrote a play about me. So
Right.
this is a different person. So I learned how to look through someone else's eyes more than I had done before, even though I'm a Pisces. I'm very communicative. I'm very sensitive. I'm very curious. I'm very aware of myself and my emotions and others and their emotions. But to really put yourself in someone else's situation and circumstances was very eye-opening. And I learned more about science and history in an acting class than I ever did in school. So I'm now in school. I'm about ready to graduate, go to New York City, and I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do for work? Well, I don't want to wait tables. And I care about my body. I've been a dancer my entire life, but I have these really like muscular legs and this kind of skinny upper body. My boyfriend at the time was a gymnast. He had this really well balanced body. And I'm like, well, I want to build some muscle. So I'm going to go be a trainer. So I go to the gym and I start to notice the trainers and I think, oh, well, I want that. I want to do that. So here comes back the science, and the science is now biomechanics and physiology and things that I can actually see, and it makes sense, and the physics of it. And so I activate my left brain and go, oh, I'm actually pretty smart. So I kind of got a new level of confidence in myself in the gym, and that kind of took over, actually. I actually became one of the director of education for the whole entire gym chain, which is in 4 different states, and taught trainers and created the curriculum. My left brain got very activated. At the same time, I was singing, dancing, and acting kind of on the side also. And then at one point I realized that I'd kind of put my dreams aside of the whole acting, singing, and dancing and in New York, and I needed a change. So I moved to California. And when I moved to California to sort of commit and recommit, I also, of course, because I have a really good skill set, I have really good resumes. I have a great personal training resume and I have a great acting resume. So I came to California just determined to do both. And I did, and I started my own business. And I licensed a company from New York to start the business here, and became a business owner in 2001, and sort of wore the hats of, okay, I'm going to put myself out for auditions, and then I'm going to put myself out to get clients. And again, based on my curiosity and the nature of me astrologically, I just will always want to learn and ask questions. I will always be a good problem solver. And if I don't have the information to solve the problem, I will learn more. So what ended up happening with my personal training clients was just getting into their lives and understanding why they did what they did and what was the motivator for whatever they were doing. Why weren't they taking care of themselves, or why were they taking care of themselves? Why would they binge and go off their program, or why would they make the choices that they made? And it just sort of, why does this person have pain? What can I learn to help them get rid of that pain? How could we rehab that joint, or how can we work on their hormones or their endocrine system? So I just learned. And that led to sort of deeper questions. And then stumbling upon my very first coach when I was in California, showing me and introducing me to Abraham Hicks and Law of Attraction back in 2002. And that was the game changer. When I understood vibration and frequency as a science, as physics, that was a huge game changer. So that led me to then be to start learning for myself, manifesting for myself, and then I wanted to help my clients and my friends and my family. Of course, nobody wants any of that, because the people that are paying me for health things, for exercise, for joint rehab, for diet, for weight loss.
They want their body to look different. They don't care what you're trying to help them with their mind, right?
Right. Even though I'm like, well, but they're attached. Like, why you? I can give you the perfect program, whether you'll do it or not, has nothing to do with the program itself. It has to do with your motivation and your internal dialogue and the things that go on. So again, just learning and learning and learning, wanting to understand frameworks upon frameworks. So I'm like a big, I'm like a sponge. And I went out searching for all this information. And then in 2014, I launched my first podcast. And I launched my first podcast called Fit to Love. It was a 6-day-week show. And it was so that I could give myself permission to talk about and explore and to share the things I wanted to talk about that I had no audience for. I knew my clients would like the fitness stuff and the exercise stuff and the cooking stuff and the food stuff and the wellness stuff. I got that piece. But then I gave myself permission to talk about the behavioral and the psychological and then the spiritual and then the relational. And I got to explore all the things I was learning about. And after 18 months and about 350 episodes, my intuition said they can't find you. And I was like, yeah, it's too general. It's too broad. This one brand cannot house all of the very specific keywords I'm about. So then I created 5 new shows and repurposed that onto each one of the show. And I rebranded that each show based on the kinds of information that was on that show. So Wellness Wednesdays became Nutrition Alternative Medicine. Freedom Fridays became Spirit, Purpose, and Energy. So, this is what I did. And within 2 months of putting out Spirit, Purpose, and Energy, again, and I put that show out as a throwaway. I'm like, it's Law of Attraction. It's my indulgent, passion. What did I do? I got lots of people writing to me. I was on all the charts. I was found very easily. I had a huge audience very quickly, and people saying this show is changing my life. I want more. And me going, oh my God, I don't have anything to give you. Because all my products and services are coming later when I put the funnels together and all the automations and all the things I'm going to develop from my fitness shows, because that's where all of my credentials come from right now. I'm not an expert in Law of Attraction, although I said that at my very first live event in 2018, and my audience, who showed up from all around the world to be there, said, yes, you are. I'm like, okay, I will take that I'm an expert in Law of Attraction. But there's no school you can go to. I mean, there are probably now.
Certification.
Right. And even if you get it, doesn't mean you live it. I don't care what certification you have. I don't care what degree you have. Just because you have that does not mean you live what you know.
Right.
So, right. So here we are. I have all the contrast of my life, including my marriage and then divorce, was the fuel to learning more about relationships and people and psychology and how it all kind of interplayed with each other. So that's how we got here. And that's one of my favorite tools. It's also important. I put down the personal training for years, like in let's see, pandemic was 2020. So I'm going to say 2020, 2021. I kind of retired as a personal trainer. That was only 3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
But it's taken me that long to pull back in a physically focused, not completely, it's always going to have emotion, but physically focused group. I just started a group called Date Your Body. It's a beta course that I'm testing out, and it's 2 months. And already in the first month, I mean, it's very, very successful. And so I'll probably run with that again next year and do like a 3 month version of it. But I'm testing it out, and I'm finally pulling back together all the work I did back then, all the work I'm doing now, and I'm putting in this course. So yeah, that's how we got here.
Wow. And that's a lot. So tell me what is your reason for doing all the things that you do? Because you want to help people in all these realms, because you want to build a big business, or is it all together? You want to be an entrepreneur, you are an entrepreneur, obviously, but what is your reason for doing these things that you're teaching right now?
Well, of course, I'm an entrepreneur and I want to create a lifestyle from what gifts and talents and zone of genius I have in the world.
Right.
But even without any money, like if none of us had currency, why would we do anything? We do it because it's exciting and it feels good to energetically continue the cycle and circle of someone who's searching, and you have something to offer and it changes their life. And then they also turn around and do the same thing. It's the momentum that gets created from helping to change people's lives.
Yeah. So you like the actual process of taking somebody that's struggling for whatever reason and helping them figure out why they're struggling and then moving forward from there.
Yeah,
Is
what I do works.
to simplify.
I was just at Dr. Bruce Lipton's event a couple of weeks ago, and I met his wife, and I sat with her and I asked her what motivates you, because she doesn't do a lot of events. They've done the honeymoon effect now 3 times, and I don't know that she'll do it again because she's kind of retired from being in front of the stage and running live events and stuff like that. But they've had fun doing it a couple times. And I said, "What motivates you?" And she answered my question, and then she asked me, "What motivates you?" And I said, "Results."
Ah, yeah,
When someone learns something that changes them, that's what
that's your passion is
definitely, it's a
someone
concept.
changes their
It's,
life.
it's healing something you don't think can be healed. It's
Yeah,
understanding, it's changing a perspective or an interpretation that causes you pain that now you get to be free. It's the idea that we are the creator of our own reality and that you get to change what you don't like and that everything is fixable. I mean, for the most part, I don't mean like reversible, but
right.
it's about understanding things from a broader perspective. It's having a wider point of view. It's having more tools in the toolbox. Because if you think that you're going to, like, I guess it's an Einstein quote, you can't solve the problem with the same mind that created it. If you don't learn anything new, if you don't change anything about the way you view or interpret the world, then you're never going to change. So
Hmm.
you'll just have pattern after pattern, and you'll be stuck in the same loop because you haven't learned anything new. Nothing's changed.
Yeah, I love that. Well, my veterinarians, I call them my veterinarians, but I am very much attached to veterinarians, and that's why I do what I do. One of our problems that I hear a lot is we feel like our job is very emotional, but we also are overwhelmed by the business and the things that we have to do, because a lot of veterinarians either they own their own business, they're entrepreneurs from that standpoint, or they work for businesses. And so they have this whole business side of their brain that they have to figure out. And then they also have a lot of emotions that they're trying to handle, plus their life, right? It's like this really difficult job that's highly emotional. Their life, because they all want to have families and children and whatever they're doing on the side. And they have a really hard time. They call it work-life balance, which I don't always agree with that terminology, but that's kind of what they're trying to do. So what kind of advice would you have for people that are listening that are struggling, they feel stuck? Like, where would they start trying to figure this all out from your perspective?
Well, okay, it's not a pitch. So hold on. I'm gonna talk about a program
It can be
because I want to outline, and whether you can go learn this from somebody else. Well, you can, they're not going to put it in the
it wouldn't
same
be the
order.
same, right?
Right.
It's
But let me just outline my thought process, because years ago,
okay.
I had one of my clients come to one of my events and she said, "You need to teach you what you do." And I said, "I can't. That's my brain, like how my brain works. I can't
How
teach
my
people to
brain works.
think
Yeah,
like me."
Right.
But the more I thought about it, it was like, oh, I can teach the tools that I use. Sure, I can teach the tools that I use. So I started certification. So I did 2 years of certification and I've got a bunch of trainers now. And I'll run it again, probably not in 2025, but probably 2026 will be the next time I'll do a certification. But it is a way to start to teach people how to think, but it's starting with the tools, with the frameworks. So for me, where would you start? Well, it depends on, and while work-life balance, you probably don't like it because you think it needs to be 50-50, and that isn't necessarily the numbers I would go, but there does need to be balance.
I think that's what the word balance means to a lot of people. To me, because I work with that, that's why I don't like the word so much, because it does imply that it's going to be half and half, and I don't believe that that's the way life is. But whatever word you want to use, it's kind of the idea that you can integrate your life and have all the things you want to have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's going to be different in different times. There's different stages of life that require different variations of that, or different ratios of the sum of the whole, right? So 100%. So it just depends on what stage of life that you're in and stage of your business that you're in. And that's going to determine what you're going to do about it, really.
Right.
In terms of where someone would start, you have to ask yourself, well, what do you really want? Like what do you really need? And I can teach this really simple without even doing the pitch about the program and all the different tools I use, because I teach this in every tool that I do, every course that I have. It's called the Feelings and Needs List. This is based on the work of Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. He wrote a book called Nonviolent Communication. Terrible title. It made me not read it for years. But his point of view was he grew up during the riots, and a Jewish man who was wondering and watching murder and asking himself the question, what drives us to act and behave like this from an observation standpoint? Because he was involved, but by being an observer. And that was really the basis of his work. And so when he wrote Nonviolent Communication, it was looking at what drives us to behave the way we behave. Why do we kill each other? Because it wasn't just that that's a bad person or that's a narcissist. I hate that word. Because the labels keep whoever's labeling people a victim, which you got to put down, because otherwise you're going to always be the victim, and you're always going to feel victimized because you've made everybody the villain, right? They're not villains, they're people. And maybe they may or may not have wires crossed, but they have many reasons why they act the way that they act, and you will never understand them unless you learn. And you don't have to learn, but I'm not a fan of labels, any of them. I use frameworks. That's different than labels. Like in terms of astrology, like that's not a label. It's just a possible way of energy working in your body and in your brain to produce an interpretation for you that's important for you. But anyway, back to the feelings and needs list. So it's a 3-step process, and I'll teach it very quickly because this is probably where everybody needs to start, quite honestly. Good. Because and this is simple but not easy. I will teach this to you. You'll be like, oh, that's simple. Exactly. Will you do it well? Yeah. No, you won't.
No, nothing's easy, right?
This is not right. Well, because it will change the way you think of things.
Right.
And the stories that we've spent years creating and justifying and anchoring in our awareness and building,
reinforcing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. Okay. So the first thing is, no matter what's going on with you, if you're in a negative space, which again is why you're going to do this exercise, if you're happy, you're not even looking at it. If you're in a negative emotion, it's because you have a need that is not being met, or the perception, I just used air quotes for anyone on the podcast, not on the video, the perception of a need not being met. Let me give you an example. In the case of love languages, if you are married to somebody, let's say your love language is touch, and your spouse, partner's love language is acts of service. You as the touch person might feel or decide and have an interpretation of being rejected because you never get touched. Well, it's because your love language of your spouse is acts of service, right? And vice versa. That person might think you are just indulgent and never contribute, and therefore also feel a little bit resentful of you because you don't contribute, because you're not doing any acts of service, right? So, but all the while, he or she are probably giving you word or acts of service, and they're giving you love. You're not receiving it. So this is the case of a perception. You think you're not getting love and connection, but you are. You're just not in the frequency or the awareness to receive it. So to go back, to reiterate, if you're having a negative emotion, it means a need is not being met, or the perception of a need is not being met. So 3 steps, 3 questions. First question, what am I feeling? So I have this sheet and you can download it. It's free. It's you get it at jjflizanes.com/feelings list. This will be something you need to put in the show notes or write down, everybody, as you're listening, because you cannot go to my website and find it. It does not, because unless it's explained, you wouldn't know what to do with it.
Right.
So you have to hear the teaching before you can appreciate using the document. All right. So I'll reiterate that again later. So on this list is 100 up here, 100 different feeling words. I bet you if I was to ask the majority of your audience or the majority of the world, how many feelings are there? Probably people would come up with maybe 10. 20 max.
Happy, sad, yeah, it's always the same. It's you almost have to have that list to really dig deep, right?
Yeah, and here's why there's 100. You have to fine tune its vibration and frequency. If I tell you, so under the category of mad, is there a difference between irritated and rage?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. But they're still under mad.
Under mad, yep.
Okay. So if someone says I'm irritated, you're probably staying the same distance and saying, okay, what's going on with you? If someone says I have rage, you're probably going to step back. Yeah. So the fine tuning of the emotion is important for the intensity of the emotion and therefore the response that you may or may not have, or they may or not have. All right. Second question, after you figure out, and sometimes it's going to be more than one feeling. It might be 2 or 3 feelings that are really dominant.
Right.
Second would be to ask, okay, so what need is not being met that's creating this feeling? Now, on this needs list are 86 basic human needs. Need does not mean needy. Need does not mean weak. Need does not mean dependent. These are literally things every human needs. Right. From beauty and celebration to freedom and choice, closeness, belonging, procreation, rest, safety, shelter, ease, flow, harmony, excitement, fun, humor, equality. Okay, everybody needs all these. Right. So you would start to determine. Now, here's where most people are going to say, oh, I have a need for. So in the case of, let's go back to that couple, and the woman says, let's use this random example. I feel sad, hurt, distressed, and frustrated because I have a need for intimacy. I have a need for touch that's not being met by my husband. All right. So I'm setting that up because here's the kicker. So step number 3, and once you decide the need, so that person needs intimacy. Actually, touch isn't on here. Intimacy is. Yeah, touch. Oh, no, touch is on here. Physical touch. Okay. So in the case of touch and intimacy. So then we say step number 3, after you determine the need, is to create strategies, more than one. It's imperative that there is more than one strategy to get that need met. And here's the most important part, that do not require anyone else to be different.
Yeah, that's important, right? Because we always think that we want to change people and we can't.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Now, in the case of the husband and the wife or the partners, and you want more touch, or you want love. And really it comes down to not just touch equals love. Like I said, the love language was touch. So the person's going to say, I'm in need of love. All right. So then the next thing would be, one of the strategies could be to have a conversation with said partner about giving and receiving love. I used to ask my ex-husband kind of often, because I'd say, do you feel my love for you? And he'd say, yeah. And I'm like, you do? Because he didn't act like he felt loved. I was like, okay, because it was a shocker. Because I'm like, okay, I'm trying these things, but they don't seem to be working. Like, you're not softening or anything. Like, I'm not feeling like you're actually receiving the love that I'm giving you. Okay, so in the case, and I don't know that I asked this then, but the next question would be like, is there anything else I could do that would be more impactful for you, or that would translate that? Because I feel like we have a different set of love language. So, and you could like go down that path. But in the case of love and a couple, because this is where couples get tricky, because it gets very easy to blame your spouse. And I work with this every day with all my clients in marriages, that they put their spouse's limitations on their life is why they're living the experience they're living. And that's actually not true, because you have to start with you. You have to be the one that gets your needs met first and figure out how to do that. And normally, if you're so starved for love from somebody else, you are not loving yourself. So the first place I would start with somebody would be to say, well, how could you love yourself in a meaningful way? And maybe it is to speak up and have a conversation. Maybe it is to go visit some family or friends. Maybe it is to schedule a date night that person decides to put not, don't wait for your spouse to do it. You do it. You step up and say, I really would love to spend some time with you. I'd love to be intimate with you. I'd love for us to touch each other. Are you interested in that? But it's you being proactive and not waiting for someone else to figure it out for you.
Right.
So couples get tricky because it is really like your partner will learn from the way that you treat yourself. But let's take a step back for a second and just take the example out of here. So the veterinarians, you're frustrated, you're tired, you're out of your disharmony, you're stressed out, you're emotional, you're overwhelmed. Am I hitting it?
Yes. Overwhelmed is a big one. Yep.
Okay. So without any specific instance or like story, I would tell everybody to download this list and just start with circling the needs that aren't currently getting met in your life that you care about. So if you're someone who doesn't care about beauty, don't circle beauty. But if you care about belonging and space and rest and ease and peace, and you're not getting it, then you start there by circling it so you know where to start with getting your needs met.
Yeah, I love that because that's going to give you a direction.
Yeah. We can't fix what we don't know is broken.
Well, and if you don't have a direction, then you're stuck. And that's the whole definition. And I think why a lot of us are overwhelmed is because we feel stuck. They feel stuck in a job. They feel stuck in, vet med because they spent all this money to go through school like that. That's a common story from the veterinarians that I hear feeling stuck. And so when you say direction, that to me speaks to that. Yeah. It gives you direction.
Well, and sometimes I think we have an illusion that, again, it's circumstantial. And it isn't.
Absolutely.
Because you could change. So Wayne Dyer had a quote said, and it says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Yep.
So if you're blaming your job or your relationship for all of your misery, changing your job or your relationship is not going to satisfy the need because you don't even know what that is. You're just wanting to assign blame. So that's why when you go back and say, what am I really looking for? Maybe there was an assumption made when you went into school of more support, more financial success, different kinds of hours. You
nice
didn't realize
clients. Everyone was going to be nice.
Right. Loving people.
Right. Exactly.
Right? Yeah. And now the reality is much different than what you imagined. And you're probably sad and feeling frustrated that you didn't know what you didn't know. Okay. So how do we move to fix it? But it's acknowledging the problem in the first place and assigning the responsibility to the only person who can, which is yourself, and not in a blaming way, not in a shaming way, not in a you made a mistake kind of way. You're here. Right. What can we do about it? How can we make this better? And what do you need in order for you to function at your highest and best? And it might be you need more space and you need to be open less and you need more staff or you need some boundaries or some rules with clients. My partner and I did a whole customer service training for they weren't a vet, they were a boarding and training and training and like they would host the dogs. It was for dogs.
Yeah, boarding and grooming and
grooming. That's the word I was looking for. Boarding and training and grooming. That's what and they had 2 locations. And we did a customer service training because they were hiring a lot of like new and younger people that were sort of less educated and they wanted to sort of give them some training. And they also knew that if they dealt with customer service, it would probably help the bottom line of more clients, more referrals, people coming, having a better experience. And it was a husband and wife team. And the husband was sort of the old school kind of left brain guy, like, oh, I don't need to get emotional. Like, in fact, emotions are bad. And you're dealing with animals. Like, hello, when did you not think that emotions are going to be super high with the fur babies of the people? Like, because unlike children at the pediatric, your dog can't talk for them. So like, they're not talking for themselves. They can't contribute. Right.
Yeah. And people are actually sometimes kinder to their animals than they are to their kids.
Right. Absolutely. And they're also going to be more upset about their animals than their kids because of the lifespan and the lack of communication from the animal itself. But when you look at getting your own needs met and taking responsibility for that, and what do I do about that, and not blaming an institution, like you'll be able to problem solve more when you understand like sort of what the root is. I went to a family reunion in my last relationship and years and years and years ago. And again, I'm very different. I'm the black sheep of my own family. So me fitting into everyone else's family doesn't normally work either. And so when we first went, I had feelings. So I'm just going to walk you through this exercise in a very concrete scenario. I wanted to go because my love language is quality time. And I felt that it was very like the right thing to do to go spend time with family. Did I want to go? My body did not want to go. My body was like, I had like a pit in my stomach and my shoulders were kind of rounded forward. And I like, oh, like I felt stuck.
Yeah.
But I wanted to go intellectually. I wanted to go. I'm like, I got to work this out. So what is this about? So I had to break it down. I had to say, okay, so what am I feeling? I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling vulnerable. And I had to look at, be honest. Then I had to go through, because there's actually 3 needs that I needed to get met. It wasn't just one. So I said, okay, so what's the fear? What's the issue? What are the needs? And when I realized that one of the needs was for connection, freedom, and for sustenance, because I have a very different diet than everybody else did. And I was
Yeah.
afraid that there wasn't going to be
They
anything
wouldn't
for
have any
me,
good food. Yeah.
anything for me to eat. So I
Right.
started with the food thing. And I said, okay, so what can I do about that? Well, we're going to pass the grocery store on the way there. I could stop and just get there's a refrigerator. I can buy my creamer, buy my snacks, buy my whatever, and just take it and I'll have it and I'll be fine. So that took the edge off the first layer. I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, I can do that. Check. Problem solved. Second one. Well, there's no internet and there's no cell service at this camp. And I might want to talk to my mother or I might want to like talk with somebody else. And I feel trapped. I have a lot of Sag in me. I'm Pisces with a lot of Sag. And I'm like, that freedom thing. Okay, I need the freedom.
That's
So I thought,
important.
well, I don't want to ask them to borrow the car, but I could rent a car. It'll cost me more money, but it'll make me feel better. If I rented a car, then I don't have to ask permission to take the car.
Then you have freedom if you need to leave or.
Yep. So check. Okay, now I'm feeling a lot better. The last one was connection. So quality time and deep conversations is what I'm about, like real stuff, not surface stuff.
Right.
Now, this is not the crowd for that. And I thought, well, I can't ask anyone to be different to satisfy my need for connection. So how do I take ownership of that? I could just pretend I'm on a yoga retreat or a silent meditation retreat. I'll take my journal and I'll just shut up and I'll keep quiet and I'll let them off the hook. And if I have a thought that I want to talk about, I'll write it in my journal. Or I'll take the car and I'll go and have a conversation with my mother or a friend or something. But
Right.
I'm going to let them all off the hook because I don't want to expect something from someone I don't think can give it to me, because that doesn't work.
Right.
I felt better about that. And then wouldn't you know, when I got there, I had several deep conversations because I did not go in with this. I had gotten my needs met. I didn't need anyone to do anything for me. And then I attracted
Well,
what I wanted.
and you had a better frame of mind so you could receive it. Because
Yes.
if you had that thought that people aren't going to be able to connect with me, then you wouldn't have allowed it. But since you were open to that, then it came.
Yeah. I was calm.
Right.
And then I attracted what I wanted, which I didn't know existed, was several people who did want to have deeper conversations. And
Right.
I was like, okay, great, cool, game on. So I got all my needs met, but I had to work through the layers to get there. And I'm guessing that your audience and your clients, it's not going to be a simple one need. That's why I said just skip to the needs and start circling the needs. Because if you have, let's say you're not sleeping very well and you are overworked and so I would say your main thing is going to be rest and some space. And so you need to like shut your practice down for a couple of days and take a vacation or take a day off, because you can't make a battery go outperform its its energy. Once it's done. And you are only going to be more frustrated and more ineffective and more overwhelmed by continuing to ask your body and your brain to work at a pace it doesn't have any fuel for.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I would think you're an empowerment strategist, and the word just popped into my mind as you were saying that. It's going to feel empowering to get to that point where you know that you can fix it and that you're in charge of that whole situation. Because we're always in charge of ourselves, but for some reason, no one taught us that when we were kids, that it's all up to us to fix all this and figure all this out.
Oh, no, because they don't know how to do it. We aren't
Right.
taught this anywhere. You have to search this information out. Nobody teaches you this.
Yeah, but it's such a like light bulb over your head when you figure it out. You're like, oh, that makes total sense. So tell me, because that word jumped out at me, tell me what an empowerment strategist is, or what's the definition? It kind of makes sense, but
Yeah, well, I came up with it because again, that sort of right brain, left brain piece. The right brainers are good at feeling, but not so good at strategy. The left brainers are good at strategy, but not so good at feeling,
Love
right?
it.
So it's being able to address a whole brain.
Right.
Because if you're really a good emotional feeler, but you have no strategy, you're going to just stay patterned in like the overwhelm of feeling all your feelings all the time, and you're not going to get too far. And if you're
Right.
someone who's good at strategy, but you aren't accessing your emotions, then you're going to feel frustrated and stuck and work and get burned out because you're ignoring the signs that your body is trying to give you of what it needs, what it wants. And you're not even making decisions based on love and joy and alignment. You're making decisions based on probably fear and scarcity if you're just in strategy mode. So it's really being able to address the whole person and ask, and there's the balance. If whichever side you're on, you need the opposite. You don't need more of what you're already good at. You need the opposite of what you're good at. So you can balance and understand how to get out of your patterns.
Right. I love that. So tell me, I read something in your bio, I think, about core wounds.
Mhm.
Can you explain that to me? What does that mean?
Yeah. So your core wounds are the beliefs that were created from 3 months before you were born until you were 7. The brain has several different brain waves. I'm sure most people have heard of them: alpha, beta, delta, theta, and yeah, there's more. But generally, when we're born and in the first 7 years, we're in theta. We're mostly in theta, which is the hypnosis state.
Yeah,
Theta
yeah.
and delta.
Just absorbing everything.
Yeah, delta is your sleeping state. Beta is kind of what we're in right now. Um, Alpha is a little more relaxed, sort of meditative state. But then there's a deeper meditative state of theta, which is where we get programmed. And a child until 7 is in theta. So everything they see, they're recording and they're as fact. This is not, they're not conscious. They don't have consciousness yet to be able to know the difference of my mother said this, but she really just cares about me. So
Right.
they can't discern that yet. So we're just recording things as information. And if your parents leave you crying for longer than you can handle, your brain decides you've been abandoned, you've been ignored, you are not valuable. And again, these are the beliefs that run your entire this is the hard drive that got created, your operating system that got created by the time you were 7.
Right.
And it's pretty wired in there. And it's called the subconscious for a reason because you don't know it's there. So the problem that I find with most therapy, I'm not a fan of traditional talk therapy. Have a whole 90-minute presentation called 3 Reasons Why Talk Therapy is Ineffective on my website. It's free. Although I can add at least 3 more to that now. I
Yeah.
did that several years ago and I could still build on that. And again, then there's the dime a dozen, amazing, have a million different tools kind of therapists. And that's great. And those people I'm not talking about. And if
Right.
your therapist has changed your life and you are different in the same situation, then good for you. You found a good one. But I have too many people that I know going to talk about things over and over again, being the victim of their own story, and they never change how they show up in the world. They don't
Right.
learn anything new. They just get validated and get, attention for being a victim. So I'm not a big fan. But when you are in therapeutic situations and you're talking about why your spouse or your child or your employer has bothered you today, you are not even scratching the surface of the thing that needs to get healed because
Right.
all of this is because of a wound. So you can talk about the stories all until you're blue in the face, but I promise you, your wound will not be healed unless you know what it is and you know what to do about it. And
Yeah.
so for me, and even today, I don't know if you've ever heard of imago therapy or Harville Hendricks and Kelly Hunt. They've written a bunch of books, Getting the Love That You Want. Anyway, I've had them on today for like the 9th time, and they have a new book out. And today, for the first time, I got to admit to him that I've built an entire course and program based on one of the exercises from them,
I love that.
which was really fun. And he's like, "Oh my God, I want to know about it. I want to hear about it. I want to see it." I'm like, "Okay, well, can we talk about it? Because, and will you endorse my next book?" He's like, "Yeah, you need to write about this." I'm like, "Okay, I will." Like, I'm feeling extra validated right now.
Right.
Just because I wanted to share
Right.
that, we all have these passions and the things that we do in the world and why we do them. You ask me like, why, what do I want to do? What's the outcome? And the outcome is for people to stop acting as if they're not powerful and they can't change their own lives,
Love that.
because you can, and I can show you how. It will be slightly uncomfortable, but I promise you, once you climb that mountain and you see the view from the top, you'll be like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad I did this because life is so much better from this vantage point."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that is exactly what I think this is all about. People like you, people that are coaching, people that are talking about the I don't know if it's emotional regulation or just awareness. Like I think of it as awareness of the way your brain works and how you can think differently in order to change things. I think that it's kind of the key to the universe.
Absolutely. And I think you have to know your core wounds to do it though, because otherwise
Right.
we can be aware right now in this red hot moment
Yeah.
how I'm interpreting you and why. But if I don't know that it comes from something that got embedded in me before I was 8, and that this is a lifelong pattern. Every single choice you've ever made is from a core wound. I promise you that. And
Yes.
and so when it's the whole idea of like, okay, I've been in therapy for 10 years, but I still react the same way, or I've had 3 divorces and I still manifest the same person. I hate every job I'm in after I've been there over a year. Like these are patterns from a wound, and you're not hitting the wound and you're not healing it because you just keep thinking circumstances. Well, circumstance is just a mirror.
Right.
You have to like, it's like a diagnostic. I work with people and we find out what the core wounds are so we know what to do next. We don't just go, oh, do this, go to do this. Everyone, like different therapies are going to do different things. So
Right.
it's like if you went to the doctor and you had pain, you would not be satisfied if the doctor just looked at you and said, well, you look fine. How about you just go do these random 5 things? You're like, well, you didn't test anything. I have pain here. Like there was no blood work. There was no x-ray. There was no palpation. Like
Right.
that wouldn't be good enough. That'd be guessing.
Right. Yeah. And that's what we don't need to do.
It just wastes a lot of time.
Yeah.
Seen too many people. It was one of those things. It was shame. I had shame about doing this in the world. I'm not a licensed psychologist. I'm not a therapist. And now I say, thank God I'm not. But for a while, because my ex-husband and my family pretty much basically would tell me that my ex-husband would say it, but my family didn't say it. Like, you aren't qualified to say that. And it was because I hit the nail right on the head. And if he was to admit that I was right, that would mean he'd be responsible for changing his behavior. So he wanted to shame me into being wrong. And again, anyone can learn this. Pick up a book. Anyone can, like, what I've learned has been through reading and experiencing and learning from others. And I'm no different than anybody else in terms of it's available to everybody to learn the same things. So
Mhm.
I never claimed to be a therapist, but yes, I'm helping people problem solve situations by understanding the mechanics of the situation, understanding all the factors involved in the situation. So it was back in probably 2016, or 2017, I got the first negative review that said JJ's not a therapist. And it hurt because I had a wound of
Right.
being devalued, and it hurt. But as all criticism, it's an opportunity to grow. And the more I thought about it, I was like, years had to pass. But I'm like, no, I'm glad I'm not a therapist because I'm not bound by any dumbass rules about what to do with my client, or them not supposed to know me, or not supposed to share personal information. So now I've had so many people come to me who say, and this one for so long, which is why I finally created that 3 reasons why talk therapy is ineffective,
Right.
because people would say, oh, I've been in therapy 5 years and I had 2 sessions with you and my whole life is different.
I know. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. You wonder then why don't the therapists change? Why don't
It's
they learn these things? I
Some of
guess is
them do. So it's the legality, right? It's the legality when you're talking about people that are dealing with suicides and, different disorders that people have claimed that they want to medicate, and, and there's legal things. Like I worked with a therapist as my client, and I was not allowed to give nutrition advice because I don't have a degree. So
mm,
I had to work around that. Like there's a lot of liabilities. I was seeing something on somebody slamming Dr. Phil. I don't have a positive nor negative thing to say about Dr. Phil, but they were slamming him that he lost his license. Well, he lost his license because you can't have a license and be on television.
right.
He
Yeah.
gave up his license. He didn't
Gave it
lose
up
his
on
license. He gave up
purpose.
his license.
Right.
He didn't do something wrong. He decided I'd prefer to do this publicly on television with people that I'm not working with and get paid a
Right.
lot of money than to do it one-on-one with people. It
Yeah,
was
which
a
wasn't
business
such a bad
decision.
decision, right? For him.
Right. Right. He didn't lose it. He gave it
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. So what do you want to tell us about the law of attraction? You kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier. Is there something different that you think about it? I mean, I shouldn't say anybody. Some of us have read books about it, and what is your theory on that law of attraction?
Well, it's quantum physics, so it's science. It's not a belief system.
Right?
You attract every day, whether you think about it or not. Whether you want it or not, you're attracting what you are. So if you don't like what you're receiving, it's because, again, going back to these core wounds, you're attracting what you believe, which is why it's important to know what you believe so you can change what you believe so you can
Right.
get a different outcome.
Yeah.
Uh, what I want to say about law of attraction is that every outcome, every scenario, every version of reality is true. So for instance, if someone says, well, in fact, I just had a podcast episode with a client that did a plant medicine journey with me. And prior to the plant medicine journey, she's very educated on all things integrative medicine, functional medicine, nutrition, functional nutrition counseling. She reads, a voracious reader, very, very educated. And even though she knows and has done law of attraction work, she still had so much fear that she wanted to defend, like a scan. Well, I have the scans, and she was afraid of death. Okay.
Right.
But
Right.
words don't teach. So even though we had like a screaming match on a Marco once because, well, wasn't screaming, but she was defending her fear. I was giving her the words and the logic of the teaching, and which she already knows. But again, knowing and understanding something doesn't mean you've embodied it or that you're living it. You have to have an experience. So when she came for her journey, it was probably the best anyone could ever want. It's like, it's the reason why anyone does it. It's because you hit all the mecca of elation and like near death experience where you cross over and you feel the love of everything, and you lose the fear of death. And it's in that experience that she really understood that when I said, look, the reality of your scans, yes, I believe that your physical body is in a certain state, but there's also a version of you that's completely healed at the same time. It's where you want to spend your time. If you want to defend the reality of this scan, you'll be in the frequency of that scan. You cannot heal cancer and keep talking about cancer.
Right.
When you're aware of cancer, you are not on the health side, you're on the cancer side. It's an
Yes.
uphill battle to hit your malady straight on as if you're broken,
Right. Yeah.
because that's the framework you're in. Versus in healed people, don't talk about that. You're going to get where you live. If you treat your body. So she came out of this journey. And again, the smarter the person, the more I think we need some help. We need some help in the crossing into the experiential. But she came out of that and was like, nothing matters. I'm going to be healed. My body's going to be healed. Everything is going to be fine. I'm going to be perfectly fine. I'm like, yes, you are. Because
Yeah.
you just release the resistance of death, because you understand death, which again, most people might think that they're not afraid of dying,
Right.
or maybe they are, but that fear and resistance really runs their life. So people need to have experiences, not just have these conversations. And I love podcasting. I think podcast listeners are obviously my favorite kind of clients,
Of
because
course, because they're looking and they're investigating and they're listening and they're learning. And there's something to listening to a podcast that, even if you listen to a whole hour and you only learn one thing, I think it's definitely worthwhile.
it is. And it's not enough to make the big changes. It's enough to make some little changes. I've had people say I changed their entire life by listening to my show, and I've never worked with them or met them.
Right.
And there's definitely people can make a certain amount of growth on their own. And then everyone will hit an upper limit of, you have to experience something different. You have to go outside of your comfort zone. You have to push through a limit that you might not even see for yourself,
Yes.
because you can't see yourself. Like, if the whole definition of the frequency is that you're in. So one more quick story about frequency. I experienced frequency. Oh, and this client, she was here. She had mold issues, like she's got mold in her house, or she's had mold in her body. And so she's very hyper focused on mold. And I have an Airstream where we did this journey, and she was the first person to, after it had been painted and like redone, and I wanted her to stay in it. And she, kind of said no. And then she admitted that when she walked in it the first time, the day before the journey, she smelled gas. Okay.
Mm.
It's an Airstream. It's not, you'd have to pull it if you're moving it anywhere. There's no gas. There's no gas tank. There's no vehicle anywhere near it. It's on the other side of my pool. There's no vehicle on the other side of it. There was like literally no way there could be gas in this. So she told me, because after her journey, she's like, I don't smell gas. I'm like, why would you smell gas? She's like, I smelled gas yesterday. I'm like, what? And then every day, she was here for like a week, because I had the whole mastermind here after that. She would go in it to see if it smelled like gas. And she's like, oh my God. And that's when she really understood frequency, because she had it in her mind, because it was old. She was expecting
Nothing
to
wrong. Yeah.
smell something, and
Right.
her brain made her smell something
Yes.
that maybe it was there, but if it is there, no one else can smell it. And I'm not saying it's not there, but my ex-husband and I, when we saw one of his friends at the beach and his brother was with us. And this is back before I had an iPad, because I don't have a smartphone even still today. I have an iPad, but I had a flip phone. So it was back. So I wasn't distracted. No, back now they're
Right.
out on the
They're on
beach
that-
and
they're
they're on their
all-
phones.
Yeah.
This was 10 years ago, maybe even more than 10 years ago. So I'm at the beach and we're watching his best friend and these two girls from Colorado kind of frolic in the sand. The three of us are watching them. We're kind of talking a little bit to ourselves, but we're not in any depth conversation. We're not, but we're just being present. We're kind of observing. We leave there, we go home. He says to me, "Oh my God, did you see how those girls were trying to bait you?" And I thought, and I watched him and he really believed that. And that was when I really understood frequency, because I thought, well, he really saw that. And who am I to say it didn't happen? But that's not the frequency I was in. I was like, oh my
Right.
God, I just witnessed frequency. Like, really understood that. I believe him. I believe that he saw what he saw, but I
Right.
didn't see it
Right.
because I wasn't in that frequency.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's something you have to experience. You can understand it conceptually, but until you're in the same situation where two people are observing the same thing at the same time and having literally different experiences with it, it's trippy, but
Yeah.
it's physics.
Well, you saying that reminds me of, the veterinarians always think that the clients, they treat all the clients the same, but they're all different. They receive the information differently. And that you saying that is basically an example that they're in a different space with their trauma. They're in a different mindset. They're in a different emotional, it's a very emotional spot that the clients are in. It's different than what we're in.
Absolutely. But actually, I never finished that story about the customer service training that we did
Yeah.
so I taught them this
Right.
and so what had happened was anytime a client would get upset, the husband would lawyer up. We saved them $400,000 in legal fees when we were done. Because
Yeah.
when I taught every employee how to handle someone's complaints, instead of being defensive, they
Yes.
use the sheet and they say, what's going on with this client? They mirrored back the client's feelings and they tried to figure out the need so they can get the need met. And then we had conflict resolution. And now the client thinks the place is the best thing ever because they help them feel better. And half
Yeah.
the time it's not even about what they're complaining about, but it
Right.
was understanding what's really going on. And it
Mhm.
translated into saving $400,000 of legal fees.
Absolutely. Yeah, it absolutely does.
So
It's just
to the veterinarian who's the client,
understanding that.
right. Well, so it is frequency, but I would go here first. I would say if your
Yes.
client's unhappy and you're defensive, that's on you because you're tired.
Right.
You have to be able to like listen for what the need of the client is so you can get the need met, and then there'll be resolution, and then you'll feel good, they'll feel good, and everything will be over.
Yes. And there'll be no, online garbage and they go to give you a poor review and all the things that miscommunication and
Right.
that misinterpretation of their emotions brings with it.
It's
Yeah,
huge. It's huge.
it is. It's
If
so
nothing else from today's episode, please
yes.
download this. Teach it to your staff. Learn it yourself. Like practice it with people, because for customer service, it's gold. And when
Yeah.
you treat somebody and you can really hear what's going on with them and you don't become defensive and whatever's happening for you, put your ego
Open.
aside for a second. It isn't about you. It's about their pain and
Right.
whatever they need.
Yes.
They will love you and give you 5-star reviews.
Yeah. Yeah. I say that all the time. Almost every client that comes in is in some sort of grief. And it's grief over their money or their time or their, pet, obviously. But there's just so much emotion there if you can just figure it out and like you said, figure out what they need to kind of handle that emotion, then everything's going to be great. I love it.
Well, it's just more effective. We went out to dinner the other night to a sushi place that moved from one location to another, and they refreshed this little place and they moved over there. And I thought, okay, we'll try it. We didn't go to that one anymore because I didn't have a good experience. But I thought, well, this is a new place. The daughter is supposed to be running it. The menu looks a little bit different. Whatever. We go over there, same sushi, the same sushi chef. So I sit down and I'm gluten free. And there's like nothing indicating on the menu. And that's one of the reasons we stopped going, because they're not very accommodating.
Yeah.
So I
Sushi.
asked, well, but I live in a place where half this town is gluten free. Okay.
Well, that's
So
true. Yeah. Yeah,
it's
that's true. Now.
I'm not a weirdo in this town. I'm normal. In fact, I'm
Right.
probably more than normal because half of them are vegan and gluten-free. So, and I'm
Right.
not vegan. So I go to this restaurant and I ask, I said, I'm gluten-free. These are things that I would like. Is there soy sauce? Can you tell me what sauces don't have soy sauce? And she comes back and says, well, there's trace amounts of soy sauce in everything. And I
That's
was
not
like,
helpful.
right. I should have gotten up and walked out. Really. I
Right.
mean, not in a fury, but just
Right.
because basically what you're telling me is,
I
and I'm
can't
not
eat.
celiac, I'm not going to die, but
Right.
you're not willing. Like I had to ask, so I ordered stuff
To help me.
dry and then I asked for sesame oil on the side so I could dip something in my sesame oil. But
Right.
at no time was there any trying to do anything. There was no,
No
how about this or how
accommodation.
about no customer
Right.
service. So the first
Yeah.
time in my life, I wrote a 1-star review and I said, fresh new look, same bad attitude. I'm like, I'm never coming back here because that is the worst customer service. It does not take long to buy one gluten-free soy sauce to
Right.
have in the place. Again, I live in a place where we're very health conscious.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
So like learn what your clients need. And if you don't want to give it to them, then just at least be upfront about it and say, we do not serve people who
Put a
have
big
these things,
sign.
these things. Right.
Don't come in here if you're gluten free. Is
Seriously.
basically what they're saying.
Yeah. Don't come in here and ask for anything except what's on the menu
Right. Yeah. Just eat what we give you and shut up.
and be happy about it. I'm like, no, I don't want to give you my money. Thanks.
I love that. That's great. Well, we're going to have to wrap this up pretty quickly. So let me know if there's anything that we haven't talked about. I'm sure there's a million things that we could talk about that I'd love to keep talking about, and maybe we'll do this again. But what did I not ask you that you think we really should get out there to my veterinary friends?
Stress is perception. I would recommend whether you have a therapist or not, watch the 3 reasons why talk therapy is effective because I talk about that and I reteach this again. Okay.
Yes.
Stress is perception.
Right.
So you can eliminate and reduce stress by changing the way you think of things. Again, back to the Wayne Dyer quote, when you change the way you look
Correct.
at things, the things you
Yeah.
look at change.
Yeah.
And using this feelings and needs list to problem solve what your deepest needs are that aren't getting met, because you're probably circling the drain, if you will, on something that, like, again, the rest piece
Right.
or space,
Right.
and thinking that somehow it's all going to work itself out when you're ignoring the thing you need the most, which is some space or some rest. So
Yeah. You have to do something about it.
yeah.
Yeah. And tell people where they can find all of this. You already kind of said some of it, but where they can find you and find all of your other information. And I'll put it all in the show notes too, but just briefly where to find.
Everything except this list is at jjflizanes.com. Now, you need to go jjflizanes.com/feelings list. So feelings with an S, feelings list, one word, will get you to the page to download the feelings and needs list. And I recommend printing several copies. Put them on
Yes.
your desk, in your car, in your bathroom, on your refrigerator, at your desk. Literally, because I promise, if you just, when next time you get frustrated, instead of telling a story and building more momentum around why you're frustrated and why you should be frustrated, just take a minute and say, why am I frustrated? And figure it out, because it will empower you and you will feel better. And you'll be like, oh, it's that easy. And then your stress will start to reduce and eliminate.
Yeah, I know. That's crazy. That is great. I love it. And always find someone to help you through this if you're feeling stuck. Get a coach, I love life coaching. Get yourself a life coach, reach out to me, reach out to JJ. We can help, right?
Absolutely. If
I
you
love it.
can't see what you can't see. So let somebody who can see past your
Yeah, I
blocks.
call it the Chihuahua brain, that it acts like a Chihuahua and it's out of control, and we have to get it under control.
Definitely.
Well, thank you so much for being here. It's been great meeting you. Everybody go check out all the information and get the feelings and needs list. It will definitely help. I've used those before and they're amazing. So I highly recommend. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And everybody have a beautiful week. Bye. Bye, JJ.
I do.